Welcome back to the McCann Dogs Podcast, Season 4, Episode 17. And today we are in the studio with Instructor Christine, who I'm going to end up calling Swanee. So let's just say Instructor Swanee is here in the podcast studio.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Swanee. And today we need to talk about kids and dogs. And this is always a really important topic to keep our kids safe, to keep other people's kids safe. And I thought this would be a good conversation for you and I to have because we're an interesting mix where I have not raised a child of my own. I have a niece and a nephew, so I have some experience in terms of my dogs with them, but not in terms of a household where I've raised a child and the child actually lives with the dog full time. So I thought we could have a really interesting conversation and hopefully shed some light on some things that are really important when it comes to kids and dogs.
For sure, yes.
All right, so first off, let's preface this. I said I have a niece and a nephew, and they are at this point a little bit older. So my nephew is 9, my niece is 13, and they've gone through all the kids stuff, really, and we weathered that quite well. You have. Tell us about your child.
My son is 20 now.
He's still a baby.
So he's, yeah. But nobody ever wants to hold him anymore.
Oh my gosh.
When he was little, everyone's, can I hold your baby? But not one person asks to hold him anymore.
He's probably very grateful for that, I would think. Right. But this is hilarious, actually. I'm just incredibly floored that he is already 20. I know this because I've known you for as many years, but it still surprises me that you have a 20-year-old son.
I know. Time goes by so fast. It's such a cliche to say, but time goes by quick.
It does. Absolutely.
Yes.
We need to slow that down.
Right.
All right, let's do that right now by talking a little bit about kids and dogs. So think back to when he was, let's start with him being a newborn. What were some of your concerns bringing home a baby and having dogs in the house? Or did you have any?
I didn't have... I feel that my dogs were well trained and I trusted them and I knew them well. So I didn't have too many concerns. I was more concerned about myself having a newborn and how could they let me out of the hospital in charge of this little person. So I think that was more. But I had done all the preparations with my dogs and I had exposed them to sounds of babies crying.
Okay.
I had exposed them to all the new things in the nursery. I had put blankets on the floor and taught them not to walk on that blanket in the anticipation that eventually there'll be a baby laying on that blanket.
Okay. That's really good.
I put like rattles, different baby toys on the floor, taught them not to pick them up.
Oh,
I had, got the baby bouncy chair and the baby swing, and we got them all set up ahead of time. And
this is so smart.
I had, put the swing on and just taught the dogs, no, the swing's not something to chase. It's, let them get all their sniffs out ahead of time. So
Perfect.
They were very familiar with all the baby apparatus.
That's fantastic.
Before we got the baby.
That's fantastic. I really love that. So let's dive a little bit deeper into some of those things because we want to make sure that we're clear on why you were doing those things. So talk a little bit about those plans and those things that you did and sort of what you were hoping to avoid by doing those things. So let's start with the, just bringing the dog into the nursery setup. Let's start there. What were some of the things that you wanted to make sure that the dog learned before the baby was even home?
Well, I wanted the dog to learn that it's a calm area. It's not a play area. It's not an area to jump up and, let's check out what's on the changing table. Let's check out what's in the crib. Let's try to sit on the chair I was going to use when I was nursing Ty. I wanted the dog to know it has a lot of rules. This room has a lot of rules.
Okay, interesting. So in that room, did you incorporate an area for the dog so that they could be in there with you and have sort of a space to associate?
Yes, I did. I did put a very, very comfy dog bed in that room.
And that wasn't for the baby. That wasn't for Ty.
It wasn't for Ty. Now, eventually, I imagine he ended up sitting in it quite a bit. But
no doubt.
But I wanted to be able to nurse Ty and to rock Ty to sleep and spend quiet time in that room, and the dog have an area that he can go to his bed. So, the go to your mat, the go to your bed training really came into help then. And, often when I was up in the middle of the night, I appreciated the company as I was trying to get Ty back to sleep, having the dog there.
That's so nice. I love that. And that really takes this image of having a dog and a child at the same time, and it puts it into such a lovely perspective. So timeline wise, how long do you think you spent doing this this sort of training? And keeping in mind that your dogs were already well trained, they already had these skills in place. So your dogs could already, I'm assuming, go to a bed in a different area. This was just a newer situation and you were showing them the ropes there. So how much time did you spend prepping them there?
I would say when we started to prep the nursery, so probably maybe like 3 months before Ty was born, we started to put the nursery together and started to get the dogs adjusted. And I'd say so 2 or 3 months before we started, when it kind of became a reality to me that, suddenly there is going to be a baby here.
There's going to be a little person soon.
You're right, yes.
And I just, it just occurred to me that I was referring to the baby coming home as if he wasn't already inside you and in the home. I of course, my experience is in bringing puppies home. So that's really funny. And anyways, was there something in that room? So that room before it became a nursery, what was it?
It was just kind of like a junk collection room.
Oh, one of those.
Yes, it was one of those rooms. Yes,
it was a new situation for the dog,
right?
As well when you cleaned it out and made it into a nursery.
Yes.
Okay, great. So right off the bat, I think that's a really nice thing to do for the dog is to right away in this new situation give him very clear rules and very clear boundaries. So it's not something that he's had free reign in this room before and then you're taking it away and now you're changing the rules on him. It's a new association and you started that training right away. So I think that's really, really, really clever of you.
Oh, thank you.
What advice would you have for people who are maybe using a room that the dog already has prior associations with?
I would say do some training in that room so that you're going to establish that room as now an area with new rules. So, spend time with the dog in the room and doing the training in the room and, rewarding the behaviors that you want.
Excellent. So if you're into reading or Netflix, this would be a good opportunity to go and sit down and relax yourself, keeping yourself occupied while you're doing this training with your dog. So that is fabulous. And then, so this is a perspective where you have the dogs first and they've got skills and then you're bringing the baby home. And we'll talk about the reverse of that as well on today's podcast. And we're also going to talk about situations like my own where there are children in life and my dogs need to be used to that, but they're not necessarily living with those children. So we'll talk about a bunch of things here. In terms of bringing Ty home, was there anything else that you were concerned about that you were thinking, I really need to make sure that I've got this in perspective and the dogs are clear and have this in perspective?
Well, I wanted the dogs to just to understand that you can't jump up when people are carrying a baby.
Oh, that's a good one. And that's really important. Not that the dogs are malicious at all, but claws hurt and they can be heavy and we don't want to do damage or knock someone over when they're carrying a baby.
And plus it, can upset the baby as well. And, the baby's got lots of smells, especially if that diaper is full. The dogs are very curious about that.
They are. I have no doubt.
So I definitely wanted the dogs to have a strong off command. And I wanted to teach that before. I didn't want to be holding baby Ty and yelling to my dogs, off, off, off. That's just not gonna fly. So I definitely made sure my off command was strong.
Okay, good.
I also with babies, they can grab onto things. And I wanted my dogs not to worry if suddenly a little baby hand reached out and instead of patting like they're used to, suddenly like grabbed an ear or grabbed fur. So one of the things that I had worked on was as Ty got a little bit older, anytime Ty touched one of the dogs, I immediately said, you get a cookie for that. And we'd run to the kitchen and get a cookie. And my dogs got very good at, Ty's, that little bit older. And he's like, I'm going to reach out to touch a dog. And the moment his finger made contact with the dog took off to the cookie jar.
Nice.
So Ty was never able to really ever make a grab at them or make contact because the dog said, he touched me, I get a cookie.
Nice.
And off they would run. So I never had to worry about a baby latching onto an ear or a baby latching onto a tail because the dogs just skedaddled right away to get that reward.
Perfect. I love that. And that is such good preemptive training to make sure that, even if you have a dog who is extremely tolerant of being grabbed and pinched and poked, like a lot of our dogs can be, it's so important that we go above and beyond that to keep our youngsters safe and to keep our dogs safe as well. It's so important that we not only acknowledge that tolerance, but we also build more tolerance and actually build a positive association with these things so that if an accident happens, we think it's so very important to manage the situations when you're dealing with kids and dogs, especially, things like making sure you're always supervising and you're always there to stop any inappropriate interaction. So whether that is the dog reacting inappropriately or whether that is the child doing something inappropriate, we want to make sure that we're there instantly to educate. And I think that the idea of building our dog's tolerances is fabulous because even with the best possible management in place, even with the best of intentions in place, accidents happen. And, the last thing you want is for your child to be running through the living room, trip over something and accidentally land on the dog and have the dog react in a negative way. So in a perfect world, of course, that never happens. But in reality, things like that happen. So it's great that you right off the bat started to teach the dogs that this is a really good thing and you get to run for something else. So the perspective is somewhere else instead of that being a fear response. That's fabulous. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that then. When we're talking about sort of a toddler age now, how did things start to evolve as you were raising Ty and he was getting a little older and starting to walk and things like that? Were there things that you rewarded the dogs for at that point as he was moving around the house and now becoming a scary little creature potentially?
Well, I made sure that, like you said, 150% supervision. Like I never had my eyes off those two. And if I needed to take my eyes off the dog or the child for a second, the dog had to go in the crate or go into behind a baby gate. So I never, if I had to run to the kitchen to, check on a pot, the dog came with me or Ty came with me. There was never, ever leaving the two of them together. Because that's when the mischief will start.
Absolutely. And it only takes a half a second for something to go horrendously wrong. So I think that is so smart to have that foresight and to be sure that you are managing one or the other or both, depending on the situation, how it's presented.
Yes.
So,
and as Ty got older too, I was able to start to teach Ty proper manners around the dog because it can't all be on the dog. It has to be on the child too. So we had to teach boundaries. The dog's crate is not Ty's play toy. It's not for him to climb on. It's not for Ty to sit inside. That's the dog's space. And if the dog is in there, we need to leave them alone. That's their private time.
I love that. And yeah, crates need to be a safe spot for the dog. For those of you that have young families, it's so important that the dog has a reprieve and a space to get away. If they're starting to feel overwhelmed, the last thing we want to do is keep putting more and more pressure on them and potentially have them react in a negative way. So that is such a good hard and fast rule. Anybody out there with a young family, kids love to climb into crates and pretend to be dogs and whatnot. It's so important that the kids learn to leave that space alone if the dog is in it. Maybe you have a kid crate for playing.
You could.
This one's for the kids. So if they are really enamored with that, I know that there's lots of stories in our dog training families here at McCann's of youngsters being raised, spending lots of time in crates at dog shows and things like that, which if the dog is not in there is absolutely fine. But if the dog is in there, it should be their safe haven and they should not be put upon by any children there. So
yes, and we did have times where we weren't using the crate and I would let Ty. It's okay if we're not if you want to satisfy your curiosity and go in there and sit. And we had a big soft crate, I remember, that was like a tent, and he used to love to go in there and sit, and I'd zip him in. He always wanted to be zipped in, of course. And so I'd close the door, and I don't know what. He was just sitting there, but you know what? It kept him happy. And when you're a parent, it's like you take advantage of those times.
Yeah,
yes.
And don't you wish you were?
Right.
Don't you wish it was something you could do on a regular basis? Every once in a while you need a break. Let's just tuck the child into a crate. Kidding, of course.
Yes.
Not something we would advocate, but kids do love to play with those crates. So tell me about some of the conversations you had with Ty then surrounding your dogs at the time and how they were to be treated.
Well, we talked about dogs having feelings, and we talked about
feelings in what regard? Emotional and physical?
Yes, definitely. I probably gave the dogs more to help Ty because he was so young. I probably gave the dog more human-like qualities than I
Okay.
would to an older child, possibly. But we would talk about how you don't take toys away. How would you feel if your toy got suddenly snatched away and ruined by someone else?
Right.
We talked about respecting the dog's space. If you're eating your food, you don't want, someone to come running over and stick their face in your plate.
Right.
That's disrespectful. We talked about how the dogs, you could hurt their feelings, how you could hurt them physically. Dogs get sick just like people, and they feel just like people. We talked about things that might make the dog sad if you did. We also talked about hugs, and I explained to Ty that dogs don't like hugs like people do.
Okay.
I said dogs are different than people. People love to get hugs, not strangers, of course, but, family members love to give hugs. But even though we love our dogs, dogs don't like to be hugged. And I said, if you ever do want to hug a dog, you would need to, have the adult there, and the hug can last no longer than 1 second.
Oh, I love
So
this.
there's a 1 second rule for a dog hug with an adult always watching. And, I have some pictures of one of my dogs with Ty, and Ty's trying to put his arm around the dog. And you can see the dog is leaning away from Ty. The dog's not enjoying that moment. And so I remember showing Ty that. I said, see how you were trying to be buddies, but the dog's leaning away. They just don't enjoy that hugging closeness that people do.
Amazing. I love this so much. And I love these great conversations put on his level when he was young so that he could understand as well. Because, of course, the empathy thing doesn't necessarily develop in early life. It takes a little bit of time for empathy and all of those wonderful things that we rely on to kick in. So it's so important to try to appeal to the child in some way and make it a fair thought for them. And I love the way that you did that. So you mentioned about food bowl, and you mentioned about not wanting to have anybody's face in your food when you're eating, which is so relevant and so valid and so important, because this is where a lot of times things go wrong, where, even a dog who is perfectly safe with the adults in the house around their food bowl, sometimes they feel more threatened by a child coming into their space when they're eating, etc. So I love that you had that conversation with Ty, first of all, but what did you do in terms of sort of proactive measures with your dogs to make sure that if some sort of accident did happen, they were comfortable and confident with that and there wasn't going to result in a bite?
Well, one of the things that we would do is we had a split level house. We had a couple little stairs, and Ty and I would sit on the stairs, and we would have the food bowl kind of between my legs, and we'd encourage the dog to come up and eat out of the bowl between my legs with Ty and I sitting quietly. And then we would put the bowl between Ty's legs, and Ty would sit quietly. So the dog was used to both of us being near the food bowl and Ty being near the food bowl, very, very quietly doing nothing. And then we would, with the food bowl, we would have, while the dog was eating, I would give Ty some treats, and he would just sort of toss the treats into the bowl if he could.
I love that.
A lot of them missed and they bounce out. But the dog said, I like it when Ty's around because I associate him with my food bowl. Like, he can sit quietly while I eat beside me. He tosses me yummy treats. I also taught Ty to be very quiet while the dogs are eating. We talked about how noises can upset dogs, and we don't want to upset our dogs. So we're always nice and quiet, and we just give them space. We don't, it's the dogs. We talked a lot about private time and special time and how we don't interrupt that for the dog.
I love that. That's so awesome. And if you have a dog that is a little bit anxious with anybody being around their food bowl, this is something where you want to be very proactive and very careful and see a behaviorist if you're going to push any of these envelopes to make sure that things are going to continue to be safe. And we would highly recommend that if you have that type of situation and you have, whether you have kids in the house or not, it is a best practice to feed your dog in the crate so that they can eat their meals without any pressure whatsoever. And then they can finish before you open that door back up again, and there's not going to be any accidents or any issues. And possession is a real thing in dogs. All dogs are capable of showing possession. in dog rules, it is fully acceptable for dogs to show possession. So we spend a lot of time counter conditioning that natural response with food bowl exercises and with exercises to make sure our dogs recognize that we're not a threat and we're actually a good thing when we approach when they're eating, et cetera, et cetera. But very, very important to take the pressure off. If you're having any issues with your dog, very important to take the pressure off and seek some professional help to help you work through that as well.
Yes. Now, there, of course, my son, we caught him playing in the water bowl a few times. So expect some splashes from your kids in the water bowl. And of course, my son wanted to try drinking like a dog.
I was just going to ask, did he ever drink out of the water bowl?
Yes. And he also had to try eating out of a bowl like a dog. So, of course, we, put some cereal in a bowl, and he was able to sit on the floor and pretend he was a dog eating cereal out of a bowl. And then, of course, he had to stick his tongue in the dog's water. Luckily, it didn't become an obsession. So,
oh my goodness, too much fun, too much fun. Alrighty. So, did Ty ever show interest in training with your dogs?
He was interested in eating the training treats. So he didn't want to actually do the training. He wanted me to train him like I trained the dogs.
Oh.
So he kind of flipped it. Well, I think we did the odd little trick or something like that. And he got depended what the dog treat was. If it was something he could eat, like a cut up wiener or cut up cheese, then yes. But he was about 2 to 3 when I was training a puppy. And he was quite jealous of the puppy and the attention that the puppy got and the praise the puppy got. So I remember one time him saying, "How come you never praise me like you do Cowboy?" And so I had to step up my, of course I praised my child, but I think he wanted the, "Yay, good boy, here's a piece of cheese." So we had to do some stuff like that. But he wanted to be trained rather than train the dog.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. And it doesn't surprise me at all because, of course, kids are in learning mode at that point. So they're always sucking in what's going on around them in the environment. And if those were his siblings, then he was wanting to fit in with his siblings.
Exactly. And he also, I remember on a walk once, he wanted to sniff everything Cowboy sniffed. And I remember him walking along, sniffing bushes and telephone poles, and I was very watchful on that he didn't sniff anything that was gross.
Oh my goodness. That's really funny.
I found if I let him do it once, supervised, then it was out of his system and didn't have to worry about it again.
That's a nice thing. I know a lot of parents deal with the repetitious nature of kids and their desires. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that are feeling very envious that he lost interest very quickly.
Once he realized it was boring, off he went.
I do remember when he was a little bit older that he came to some agility classes with Cowboy.
Yes, as he got older, he was interested in training. Now, I think he was more interested in the glory, like the finished parts. He didn't really want to do the basic, the hard stuff.
How old was he at that point?
He was probably 10, 11, 12.
So understandable.
He wanted the trained dog. He didn't want the untrained part of it.
Gotcha.
But he was interested. He definitely was interested and did do some things. But then, as boys get older, they, get interested in, in their friends and laser tag and riding their skateboards and doing that. So, but that preteen, like maybe that tween, he did show some interest. Yes.
Gotcha. Tons of fun. I do remember him in agility class and doing some jumps and things himself.
Right. Yes, I do. And I remember him laying on the ground and rolling around with the dog he was supposed to be training and not listening well. So, So, kids often say they want to train, but sometimes it's...
Yeah.
Right. Yes. They just want the glory parts, not the learning parts.
Absolutely. And that's understandable because, they're busy enjoying life. So I don't want to do the work.
Right.
In fact, just have the fun.
I remember one of the instructors and him were doing jiu-jitsu takedowns in the corner of the agility hall during class. And it's
I remember that actually.
One of our past instructors had done not agility. He did agility, but he did jiu-jitsu. Then Ty was in jiu-jitsu and they were having quite the fun.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Shout out to instructor Mark, who is somewhere over in Europe right now.
Yes,
he is a world touring machine, that man. So, alrighty. So let's talk a little bit about the reverse situation. So this is raising a child with dogs who were already well trained, already had good listening skills, etc. I know a lot of our audience is probably saying, but my puppy is coming after the child.
Right.
So let's talk about what are some of the top frustrations that come to mind when you think about our students trying to raise a puppy with youngsters?
Well, I think puppy nipping is probably one of the biggest things.
Ding, 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 ding.
Right. Yes.
We need a sound effect for that,
yes.
because that is exactly what I would have said
right.
as well. So those little needle teeth that
yes.
puppies come home with are quite the force to reckon with at times.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that kids are some of the best proponents of bringing out those puppy teeth, because they really act like litter mates. Mm-hmm. They run and they scream and they flail with their hands. And we actually want them to be able to be kids. So we want to teach both the kids mm-hmm. and the dogs how to interact appropriately together. And sometimes that means when you have a puppy in the home, you're not going to let them spend a lot of time just romping and playing with the children, because mm-hmm. of course, we like to be proactive and we like to teach our dogs what's right before we set them up to fail. And a lot of the times people think that they can just bring the puppy into the house and let it loose and let the wonderful interactions between the children and the dog ensue.
Right.
And of course we have this Disney model in our head
yes.
where that would happen on a show like
mm-hmm.
My Dog Skip, but not in real life.
No,
reality
is
very
yes.
different. Very,
yes.
very different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely so important to first deal with some of those pitfalls before involving the children in play. And that's not to say that the kids can't be involved with the puppy. The kids
right.
can definitely be involved with the puppy, but not in this frantic, running, screaming, playing mm-hmm. sort of way, because that's just going to bring out those bad nipping behaviors.
Right.
And it's going to end up reinforcing those bad nipping behaviors because, of course, for the puppy, it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
So our puppies love to run and chase and play and bite. And if you were to watch two puppies interacting with each other, it would be a very normal thing. Mm. Like it would be nothing to point out. And even the same people who were struggling with their puppies nipping their kids would likely still watch an interaction where two puppies were playing together with lots
right.
of mouthing and enjoy it.
Exactly.
Because
yes.
it's natural in that
right.
case.
And your puppies just had 8 or 9 weeks of nipping and biting and wrestling.
Yeah.
Yes.
And puppies come home from the litter with different reinforcement value from that. So some puppies in the litter will be a little bit quieter and more reserved, mm-hmm. and they might be the puppy that was being bullied a little bit by some of the other puppies. Mm-hmm. So they might come home and they might be a little bit quieter with their mouths and they might not use them quite as much. Or you might have a puppy from the litter that was the big cheese in
right.
the litter
yep.
that sort of ran the show
yep.
and used his teeth on all the other puppies. And sometimes they'll actually learn good lessons from their litter mates a lot of times. Sometimes the litter mates will say, you know what, you're too rough. I don't want anything to do with you. And they'll sort of disassociate from that puppy and let that puppy sort of wander around by himself and not want to engage and play. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times those little, I want to call them bully puppies, but just for lack of a better word, those puppies that are bullying in the litter will often learn good lessons to back off and use their teeth a little bit better. So they do get good information from their litter mates in a lot of cases, but either way, you can have a really wide variety of reinforcement coming with that puppy coming home and having spent just like the last 4 to 5 weeks romping, playing, having a party with their litter mates. As soon as their eyes are open and their legs are moving, they're mm-hmm. they're off to the races and
yes.
enjoying life. So,
right, yes.
Yeah.
I think a good thing is to tell your children, the puppy's going to come home and the puppy's going to be nipping. So the kids aren't surprised by it. I think sometimes kids think they're going to get this puppy and they're going to pick it up and hug it and love it and the puppy's going to lick them. So be honest with your kids. Be honest. Say,
that's great. I love that.
This puppy's going to come home and he's had 8 weeks of nipping his litter mates and he's going to think it's fun to nip you.
Oh, I love that.
And we have to teach the puppy it's not fun to nip people and it's just not how you play with people. So we need you to not squeal and run away. We need you to be quiet. And if I say stand still like a tree, you need to stand still like a tree so I can go in and show the puppy that we're not supposed to nip people. So I think preparing your child for the reality of the puppy and not painting a pretty picture. Say, this is going to be some work for us. And also saying to your kids, you know what, the next couple of weeks, we might not get a good night's sleep. Mm-hmm. We might be up in the middle of the night with the puppy a few times. There might be puppy pee on the floor. Letting the kids know that this is a task the family is taking on, and we have to work together as a group, as a family unit, to help this puppy become part of our family.
Oh my goodness, that's so brilliant. I love that so much. And I think that I think that when you bring the kids into the fold as well, you make them part of the process instead of just dictating to them, that is going to set you up for such a much better time and a much easier time of having these interactions go well.
Right.
So that's amazing. I want to say that we deal with puppy nipping all the time in both our in-person and online Puppy Essentials programs. So if you are listening to this and you're like, this is me, this podcast was for me, join us in Puppy Essentials, either in person or online. You know, you can join us from anywhere in the world in our online Puppy Essentials program, and we will help you with the nipping. We've got all sorts of tactics that we use that are tried and true from 40 years at McCann Professional Dog Trainers. And we can carry those forward with you, and we can help you troubleshoot through the nipping. You know, not every puppy is created equally. They're all nipping for, you know, sometimes they're nipping for different reasons, and we can help you troubleshoot through that and figure out what is going to be the best solution for you and for your puppy. Alrighty. So back on track here with our conversations with our kids to let them know that there's going to be some nipping, et cetera, and that they're going to have to, you said, be a treat. I love this. Let's talk a little bit about this. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, if a puppy is nipping and biting and the child's instinct is to start flailing and jumping up and running away and squealing, the puppy's going to go, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And it's going to escalate. On. And the puppy's going to say, I want this to happen again. I want it to happen again. But if the child just stands up and stands still like a tree, now it's not fun for the puppy. There's no movement. There's no squealing. And the adult can quickly get in there to fix the situation. So the puppy has no reinforcement from the child. So they're less apt to continue it. And,
perfect.
You know, saying, it's like pulling that slot machine. Can I make him squeak? Can I make him squeak?
I love that. And that's so true.
Right. And training your kids ahead of time too, just like you prepare your dog for the arrival of a newborn, you prepare your children for the arrival of the newborn puppy.
Perfect.
And you have weeks and weeks before to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of giving them tools to use as well. So we never, ever, ever have children discipline puppies. Never. And whether it is their puppy, whether it is a puppy that belongs to somebody that you're visiting, etc., the children should never be expected to discipline the puppy. There should always be a capable adult present. Always be a capable adult supervising all interactions, so that if there is nipping behaviors and if that attempt to stand up and be a tree doesn't necessarily result in the puppy stopping that nipping, there's an adult there that can step in and stop it. So I like to recommend for a lot of our clients that they spend a lot of time with the puppy working on skills when the children are in the room. So whether the children are quietly hanging out in the room or busy in the room will depend on the puppy's level of skill. So initially in the early stages, I'll recommend that the children are sitting doing quiet activities. So, give them coloring books, have them sit, or, maybe Nintendo Switches or whatever the case may be
you
these
just
days.
Aged yourself.
I did. My childhood pastimes were definitely different than these days' childhood pastimes. So give them a Nintendo Switch. Excuse me. Have them sit down at the table, and then from there you can do some work with the puppy on, any sort of skill. You can work on handling skills. You can work on sits and downs. You can work on tricks with the puppy. And basically what this does is it helps the puppy realize that they're not necessarily going to get to chase the children and be in play mode just because they see them there in the room. It teaches the puppy to have sort of multiple facets of understanding of what these little people bring. Because if every time they see the kids, it's game on and it's overstimulation like to the max, that of course is going to become the conditioning behind our puppies, and then it becomes this tumbleweed rolling downhill where it's really hard to get control of. So working some exercises with the puppy while the kids are first quiet, and then once the puppy has some understanding of focusing on you and settling on command and working through different skills, now you can bring the children into the room and have them do something a little bit more active. Not necessarily running a racetrack through the house, but somewhere in between that.
Right, because we don't want, often children set up the puppy to fail. We don't want the puppy to be wrong. And often around kids, that's kind of what can happen. I remember my son was crawling around on the floor. I don't know what he was pretending to be, but of course a puppy latched onto the back of his pant legs and he was dragging the puppy along. And, I had to discipline both of them. Like I had to say, you know what, like, to the puppy, you can't bite Ty's pants, but I have to say, Ty, you know what, you look what happened here. Like, if you want to play like that, let me know and we'll put the puppy away, or play like that there, or we'll play like that another time. But we, I think it was Atari. I said, Atari's not ready for that yet. She's just not ready. So
I love that you educated in the situation, and I love that you also gave yourself a break and took yourself off the hook there as well, so that you could take a little rest, and your puppy is now in the crate, and now you can play with Ty, and then when Ty is ready to relax and chill out, you can bring the puppy back out again at that point.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes,
love
definitely. That. Yes. So there's lots of times where the puppy does go away when the kids are doing more rambunctious things, and I'm very honest with the children. I'm very educating with them. I'm saying, this is why we're doing this. And I remember about children never disciplining dogs. I remember reiterating to Ty many, many times when he would see me, take Cowboy by the collar to get after her for something. I would say, this is only mommy or daddy can do this. Like you can't do this. And I just remember now reiterating that you cannot do this.
Oh, that's so important. The educational factor is so important on all facets. So that is wonderful. I want to dive a little bit into the myth of some dogs just not being biters, because I think that that's something that gets really perpetuated a lot in our society, and I think it's a really dangerous myth, especially when it comes to children and dogs. And the idea that a dog is either a biter or not a biter is such an oversimplification. Lots of dogs will have very high thresholds where you can they're really, really tolerant, whether it's that they have a high pain tolerance. So when a child is crawling all over them in their knees or in their stomach, et cetera, they have a high enough tolerance that they're willing to put up with that. Or if a child is yanking on an ear or a tail or something like that. Some puppies or some dogs just have an overly high tolerance for the child themselves. So not necessarily being as concerned about the child in their space or on top of them, etc. And a lot of the times people get these very false senses of security that dog will never bite. So what are your thoughts about that? What's your first reaction?
All dogs are capable of biting.
You got it.
Yes,
And I know that there's some people in our audience out there who are thinking, oh, but not my this and not my that. And, I remember there were times in Jaden's life, for example, where I thought, like, this dog will just never bite anyone or anything. And he never did. But it was because he had an incredibly high threshold for things, and I didn't really have to be as concerned as I would have been for a dog who maybe had a lower threshold and lower tolerance when it came to things. But as you said, every single dog will bite, and depending on those thresholds, they may move from one day to the next as well. So a dog who is usually really confident with children and doesn't seem to mind, and this, of course, is with the caveat that a lot of times people are just undereducated when it comes to reading their dog's body language and understanding when their dogs are comfortable versus not comfortable, because they're not seeing any overt reactions like growling or barking or lunging, things like that. But there are other things, of course, that we can look at first, like ears pinned back and licking lips and, just general submissive behavior, which is the dog trying to say, look, I don't want any trouble here. Please leave me alone. And unfortunately, if those signs get missed and that body language gets missed, a lot of the times the dog will start to escalate and they'll start to bump up towards those thresholds.
Right, yes.
And you might have a dog that one day is not feeling very well. One day they might have a little bit of an upset stomach. So that's going to add to those where the lever is moving in terms of those thresholds, and it's going to make that threshold come down a little bit because the dog has less capacity for tolerance at that point. So
actually, that's making remember things. I remember talking to Ty about, if you ever see one of the dog's teeth, it means to back away immediately. So if you ever see teeth, and of course sometimes they'd pant and he would back away, but as he got older, he recognized what panting was. We also talked about freezing.
Okay.
I said, if one of the dogs is ever near something and suddenly they freeze, and I would freeze kind of like a dog. I'd say that, back away. If they freeze like a little statue, I said, it means they want you to move back.
Okay.
And then there's lots of great resources on the internet. I printed off a like a comic strip of dog kind of behavior.
Okay.
And I put it on the fridge at Ty's eye level. And I remember looking, it was a little Boston Terrier, and I remember looking at it, and it showed kids interacting right and interacting wrong with this little dog. And
nice.
it was kind of like a bedtime story.
Yeah.
We really looked at it, and we put it on the fridge, and we would refer to it sometimes about things. And I remember Ty was very interested in that. Ty loved things that were printed out. Like Ty liked rules.
Cartoons and stuff too are always very appealing for children.
Right, and it showed people, like kids, doing things. Like it showed a little girl hugging this dog, and the dog saying, "I don't like this, I don't like this," like in a thought bubble above his head, and and things like that. Like a dog approaches the child, and the child pats the dog's chest, and that's fine. But then it showed a dog trying to get away, and the kid was continuing to chase the dog, trying to pat its head. So through that, I was able to have discussions with Ty about the dog's feelings. And I think that was a really good thing. I just remembered that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a fabulous thing. Absolutely fabulous thing. And I'm so glad that memory triggered for you, because I think that the education of the child and the education of the parents in terms of dogs' body language could be the exact recipe to avoiding some sort of a disaster when it comes to dog bites, etc. The more you know, of course, the more you can read and communicate with both the dog and the child. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I have a story. I worked at an emergency vet clinic, and a family came in with a golden retriever who had been apparently fabulous with their kids all their lives until he wasn't. And the dog had bit one of the children, and they brought the dog in to be euthanized. It was like a Saturday night it had happened. And the vets, when she got the dog into the back, this seems like a sweet dog. Like, what's happening here? They had a good look at the dog, and they found a crayon inside the dog's ear canal.
Oh, my dear.
So at some point, the children, unsupervised, a baby, of course, had put a crayon inside the puppy's ear, and now the dog was in excruciating pain, and that's why the dog had bit.
Oh, my gosh.
So the dog's life was spared as soon as they said to the parents, "This is why your dog bit. It's in horrible pain. There's a crayon in its ear." And so I think the parents learned quite a few lessons that night of never leaving dogs and young kids unattended.
Yeah, you just never know what's going to happen. That is actually horrifying. So I have to know, and I'm sure everybody is wondering what happened with this dog. Were you able to get the crayon out?
Yes, they took the dog. They were able to get the crayon out and treat the infection that had occurred around it.
Oh,
and I remember the dog was hospitalized with us for a few days. I'm not sure how bad the bite was. I don't know if it was a face bite or an arm bite, but it was bad enough that they were going to euthanize.
Oh my goodness, that is so terrifying. Right. And that the poor dog and the poor family and like the whole situation, and good supervision can help you avoid a disaster like that.
And also watch your children's friends, because they don't know how to act around dogs. Absolutely. I remember Ty having a group of his friends over when Honda was a puppy, and Honda walked through the group of boys, and I was watching, of course, and then all of a sudden one of the young boys just like scooped in to pick Honda up by his front paws, and I'm like, no, you don't. No. So, here I am, like, educating this group of boys, and I can see Ty like rolling his eyes, like, oh my gosh, Mom, you're embarrassing me. But I'm like, no, you never pick up a dog by paws. Like what?
No.
Taking my puppy away. And so, watch your kids' friends too.
Good call. So was there anything that when Ty's friends would come over, was there anything preemptively that you would tell them about the dogs?
Well, generally, I usually put the dogs away, because I knew there was going to be Nerf gun fights and silly string fights and all kinds of chaos and mayhem. But some of it, if there was just one kid coming over, or it was a trusted friend that I knew a lot, I would just say, I'd often say to Ty, can you just make sure that, Zach is fine around the dogs and that. And as Ty got older, he was able to basically get rid of the dogs or tell his friend, like, don't do that. But I generally always supervised, or the dog was in the crate. And often as they got older, the dogs were more pests, because, they would want to play Nerf gun too. And they would, their tag games, they get chased by a dog. So,
perfect.
But kids' friends can be, and be careful too if you're sending your children to people's houses with dogs. One of Ty's friends, they had a very, very aggressive dog.
Oh my goodness.
And I was
this
always
is an awesome point.
Always a bit leery of Ty going over, but I talked to the parents about it, and I would question Ty about it, and I was satisfied that the parents were doing a good job of keeping that dog locked up and not allowing it to be out with the kids.
Good. So I'm sure that there's not that many people listening to our podcast who don't have dogs or don't have dogs on their radar. But if you are listening and you have kids but no dogs, that is an excellent tip. It is still so advantageous for you and could save you quite a bit of heartache and the kids and the dogs quite a bit of heartache if you educate them a little bit on how to act around other people's dogs, how to be a tree. All of those things are so important. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Right,
That's a really interesting point.
Even just, children often stare at dogs right into their eyes, and they don't realize that dogs don't like that. That's
a direct threat usually.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So I just would always tell Ty that when you meet a dog, stand slightly sideways and don't make direct eye contact. If the dog approaches you, then you can give him a scratch on his chest. If the dog doesn't approach you, leave it be. It doesn't want to be touched right now.
Perfect. And always a good idea to have the dog come and investigate the child first versus, a lot of the times there's these, I think older, from when we were kids, it was always let the dog sniff your hand. And some dogs, if they're really nervous, reaching into their space is going to give them more anxiety. And if they can't leave the scenario easily, that could result in a quick bite as well. So we want to make sure that we are educating our children as well as our pets on how to interact appropriately. And when meeting strange dogs, that is really, really sage advice. We want to make sure that we're not having the kids go into the dog space, because that can be definitely nerve-wracking for some dogs. Some dogs are going to love it.
Yes,
there's lots of really wonderful dogs that are just like, they take everything as it comes, and they have those high thresholds, and they don't put us into that stressing and worry space. But it's always good practice, just to assume that every dog has the potential to be a danger until you feel a little bit more comfortable with it.
Right. Yes. I remember I always told Ty when he was riding his bike, whenever you pass a dog and you're on your bike, assume the dog is going to chase your bike. And most dogs don't, but a lot do. But I wanted Ty to be always aware of his environment and aware of the dog. So I said, assume the dog wants to chase your bike. So make sure you give it space, slow down, maybe even get off your bike and walk past the dog with your bike. Because the last thing I wanted was a big dog to leap out at him on his bike.
Absolutely. It's such a good lesson to teach your child. My sister-in-law actually was jogging and was bitten in the calf by a dog who was loose on somebody's property and got stimulated by her running. So, dogs are prey animals, and running and chase is a big thing for them. So that's a really, really valid point. And I love the idea that he might even think, okay, I'm going to get off my bike and walk past this dog instead of taking the chance of running. This has been a good episode. Is there anything else that you wanted to throw out there in terms of your thoughts with kids and dogs?
Well, I also found out that furry dogs make good napkins or serviettes for your children. I remember...
what on earth do you mean?
I think Ty was maybe about 6 or 7, and I noticed there was a big spaghetti stain on the back of one of the dogs. And I'm like, where did this come from? And I peeked around the corner, and there was Ty wiping his face on the dog's fur.
Oh my goodness.
And I think he thought it was fine to do. So,
and this was a cream-colored dog.
Yes.
So it showed up very nicely.
Right. And she was kind of right at Ty's face level too. It was very, very simple way to wipe your dog and wipe your face. And it was like, the things kids come up with.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. The unpredictability of kids is sometimes something that we need to try to stay ahead of. So
yes.
I hope that you have found this episode to be enlightening and educational in terms of kids and dogs and interactions. And on that note, I'm Instructor Shannon.
I'm Instructor Christine.
Happy training.